Ooh-wee. That one smells good.
Yeah, what does it smell like, Brid?
Smells like peanut butter. So I'm drinking a peanut butter milk stout from Belching Beaver Brewing Co.
Yeah, I'm drinking a Two-Hearted IPA with a picture of a trout on it.
A Two-Hearted IPA is good. I like that one, actually.
Oh. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
It's pretty good. Yeah, I usually go for IPAs, but I'm like, you know what? I want a milk stout. I almost bought a Big Bad Baptist again, but I didn't see one that I really wanted, so...
So you had $25 to buy one?
Yeah, dude, they're
sad.
So expensive.
He's ready to chastise you with the Lord. That's why we call him the BBC.
No.
Baptist that chastises people.
I know how to spell Baptist. It's the silent C.
Big Baptist.
I don't remember the last one I had, but it was really not my favorite, and I was like, ugh. It was so heavy, and just the taste was not there for me. So, might be a minute before I visit the Baptist again.
You really hit you.
He hits you hard. That Baptist does not pull his punches, man. He hits you with the Lord. He just cold cock right in the mouth.
Praise the Lord. Hallelujah.
We watched a scary movie the other night called Together. I don't know if you've heard about that one.
No, it's about.
It's about this couple who goes hiking and they stumble upon something like this underground tunnel, and afterwards they start like gravitating towards each other, like physically, and it's weird, man. It's got a little bit of like body horror in it, which is kind of wild. I don't know. It was okay, but the ending was a little disappointing to me.
Maybe I'll check that out.
It's on Hulu, if you got Hulu.
You remember the X-Files episode of The Cave?
I don't. I need to watch the X-Files because I think I've only seen like 3 episodes, and it's been like a long fucking time.
I've seen everything but the new stuff, but there's an episode where people go into a cave, and I can't quite remember all the details, but I think like it does some type of like thing that makes you kind of aloof, and it like digests you. And in the story, apparently it's like this classified organism that's huge, lives throughout like the national parks. So maybe that's why people disappear there.
I'll show you a huge classified organism. Anyway.
It's illegal in 14 states.
I can't travel across.
I literally can't go. I literally can't go to the state of California. I wish I could. I want to see the beach, but they won't let me go.
I can't board a plane. I can't do anything, man. I have to drive everywhere. Anyway, have you seen anything new and noteworthy, Cleet?
No, I didn't.
All right. Well, what's on the agenda tonight? All this hard work you put in. What are we talking about here?
Okay, so the theme for tonight is true stories of things people saw that was unexplained.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I mean, we did an episode, was it last week, 2 weeks ago, about strange kids' families, you know, that you go to a friend's house and their mom does some weird shit and it scars you for life.
I wouldn't take a shit there.
Yeah, use the shit rag.
I don't want to use the toilet paper, but I also don't want to use the rag. Why does this pie smell like pecan? No. Why does this rag smell like pecan pie?
Why does this pie smell like pecan pie?
Go ahead, please. Go ahead, sir.
I don't know if I want to. I don't know. I think you should.
I
insist. I'm uncomfortable about this. I need an adult present before I read any further. I need my lawyer present. Okay. All right. Well, let's jump into these spooky stories from kids. The first one is called Secrets in the Garage.
Secrets you got in your garage, Britton?
I plead the fifth, buddy. Growing up in a small town, you tend to notice things. The people in our little community mostly kept to themselves, but everyone still somehow knew each other's business. Our street was quiet, lined with old houses and tall trees that whispered in the wind. My family lived in a small house with a white picket fence, but our neighbor's house was different. Bigger, newer, and always spotless. You want to come and hang out in my bigger, newer, spotless house, buddy? It looked out of place among the rest of our homes. The owner of that house, Mr. Collins, was a wealthy man who lived there with his wife, Mrs. Collins, and their 2-year-old daughter, Stacy. Mr. Collins was an odd man. He didn't speak much and he kept to himself, but what stood out most was his obsession with his car. Uh-oh. What's he going to be doing with his car? Dude?
I bet he's just going to polish it.
I swear to God, if he starts getting freaky with the tailpipe, I'm going to freak the fuck out, man.
Put a little flashlight in there.
Oh, God, turn it on. Jesus Christ. Okay. Oh. Gotta get the hum.
That might hurt somebody.
Anyway, I'm just gonna assault somebody. Okay, shut up. He owned a sleek black sports car, the kind you only see in magazines. Every weekend, without fail, he would be outside polishing and cleaning it as if it were made of gold. He spent hours on that car, making sure every inch was perfect. Sometimes I would watch him from my window, wondering why a car could mean so much to somebody. Mrs. Collins was the complete opposite of her husband, always kind and friendly, often waving at me when she passed by. Sometimes she would even stop to chat, asking about school or offering me some of the cookies that she baked. Stacy was a happy little girl, always giggling and playing in their yard. The sight of the three of them together was comforting, a rare bit of warmth in our otherwise quiet neighborhood. But then one day, everything changed. Mrs. Collins and Stacy disappeared. It was as if they vanished into thin air overnight. I remember the day the police came to our door, asking if we had seen Mrs. Collins or Stacy. They said Mr. Collins had reported them missing, claiming his wife had left him and taken their daughter with her. My parents were shocked, but there wasn't much we could really tell the police. We hadn't seen anything unusual, and like everyone else, we just assumed Mrs. Collins had left on her own. Weeks passed, then months, with no sign of them. The whole town buzzed with rumors, each one wilder than the last. Some said Mrs. Collins ran away with another man, while others whispered about something far darker. I tried to push it out of my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Every time I saw Mr. Collins outside polishing his car, a chill ran down my spine. It felt wrong, like he was trying to distract himself for something horrible lurking beneath the surface. Then, one day a few months after Mrs. Collins and Stacy disappeared, something strange happened. My dad was in our garage fixing up his old truck when he noticed something odd in Mr. Collins' garage across the way. The door was slightly open, and inside, barely visible in the dim light, was Mrs. Collins' white Jeep. It was covered in dust like it hadn't been touched in months. My dad called my mom and me over to see, and we all stood there staring in shock. If Mrs. Collins had run away, why would her car still be there? A few days later, we noticed the Jeep was gone. Mr. Collins had sold it, or at least that's what we guessed. He never spoke a word of it to us. After that, the way he behaved became something stranger. He stopped going outside as much, and when he did, he seemed nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder like he thought someone was watching him. The once spotless black car now sat neglected under a thin layer of dust, and his yard, which used to be immaculate, was growing wild and untended. Then one night, something happened that I'll never forget. My parents and I were eating dinner when we heard a loud crash from Mr. Collins's house next door. My dad immediately grabbed a flashlight and told my mom and me to stay inside while he went to check it out. From the window, I watched him walk across our lawn and knock on Mr. Collins' door. It took a long time for Mr. Collins to answer, and when he finally did, he looked pale, almost sickly. I saw my dad say something. I later learned he asked, "Everything all right over here?" Mr. Collins just gave a stiff nod and muttered that he had dropped something. Then he quickly shut the door. "Oh, I just dropped something. Exploded in the bedroom." When my dad came back inside, he looked unsettled. He told us he'd seen something strange when Mr. Collins opened the door. In the dim hallway light behind Mr. Collins, Dad caught a glimpse of a pot of some kind of liquid boiling on the stove, and next to it, a gun lying on the kitchen counter. Oh man, is he cooking them? A fucking Dahmer?
What?
He couldn't explain it, but something about that brief sight had disturbed him deeply. Why was Mr. Collins cooking so late at night, and why was a gun out in the open? I don't know, some people like to cook ramen while staring at their pistol. I don't know.
That's just how Americans have breakfast.
We had more questions than answers, and each one made my skin crawl. After that night, things seemed to spiral out of control. Mr. Collins became even more reclusive, practically barricading himself inside that house. Meanwhile, the whispers around town grew louder. Some people openly speculated that he had just done something terrible to his wife and daughter, that there was no evidence, no proof, just a collective gnawing suspicion and the community's growing fear. I started having nightmares about the whole thing, imagining what might have happened behind the Collins' closed doors. The thought that something so horrific could have taken place just a few yards from our house was truly terrifying. Years have passed since then. I grew up and eventually moved away, doing my best to leave those dark memories behind. But now and then I still think about Mrs. Collins and little Stacy. I wonder what really happened to them, where they are now, and whether they ever found safety. I'll never forget the sight of that white Jeep hidden in Mr. Collins' garage, or the look on Mr. Collins' face when my dad knocked on his door that night. I'll never forget the fear that gripped our town in the months that followed their disappearance. Sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet, I still feel that same chill running down my spine. I know I'll probably never learn the truth, but I can't help fearing the worst, and I hope, wherever they are, that Mrs. Collins and Stacy are safe, far away from the man who spent so much time polishing his goddamn car.
Hi, Mr. Collins.
What do you want? Oh, I'm just coloring.
I'm just cooking with my gun.
Dale Collins. Dale!
Now, this one is called Dead End Delivery. I had been delivering food for a few months, driving all around the city and getting to know every corner of it. Most nights were pretty routine. Pick up the order, follow the GPS, drop it off, then head on to the next delivery. But this night was different. It was late, probably a little past midnight, when I accepted an order that came from a part of town I didn't recognize. The GPS led me away from the familiar main roads and into a neighborhood I've never seen before. The houses in the area were spaced far apart, and the streets were a twisty labyrinth that didn't seem to make any sense. Each turn I made took me deeper into a maze of narrow roads and dark, empty alleys. Streetlights were few and far between out there, and the scant light they cast created long, distorted shadows that gave everything an eerie vibe. The further I drove, the more certain I became that something was wrong. The roads weren't matching up with the map on my phone at all. I followed the GPS instructions, then suddenly it would recalibrate and insist I turn around as if the streets themselves were changing behind me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, a knot of unease growing in my stomach. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of driving in circles, the GPS announced that I had arrived at my destination. I slowed the car and looked around. I was at the end of a cul-de-sac that seemed like an absolute middle of nowhere. Before me stood a tall, narrow house with peeling paint and broken windows. The front lawn was a tangle of overgrown weeds that reached up to my knees, and there wasn't a single light on inside or outside the place. It looked completely abandoned. I hesitated, my hand hovering over my gear shift, ready to throw the car into reverse. Every instinct screamed at me to get out of there. But then I thought about the order. Someone was waiting for their food, and it was my job to deliver it. Maybe it was just an old house that someone lived in, I reasoned. Perhaps the resident was just elderly and just hadn't gotten around to fixing the place up. I tried to shake off the creeping dread that clung to me like fog. I took a deep breath, grabbed the bag of food from the passenger seat, and stepped out of the car. The air was thick and heavy, almost suffocating. Not even a breeze stirred. As I made my way up the gravel driveway, the only sound was the crunch of stones under my feet. The night was deathly silent. The kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat in your ears. The closer I got to the house, the stronger the feeling that I was being watched. My skin prickled, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder at the quiet street behind me, but there was nothing, no one. When I reached the front porch, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. It was open just a crack. I gently nudged it with my foot, and it creaked open further, revealing a yawning dark hallway inside. I could barely see a few feet past the threshold. The darkness beyond swallowed everything. I felt a cold sweat on my forehead. Summoning a bit of courage, I called out, "Hello, your food delivery's here." My voice sounded small and uncertain, quickly swallowed by the gloom inside the house. There was no reply, just my own voice echoing back at me from somewhere deep in the hall. Something was very wrong. Every fiber of my being was urging me to drop the bag and run. I was poised on the porch, 1 foot inside and 1 foot out, heart hammering. But before I could act, I heard a sound that made the decision for me. From somewhere down the street, or perhaps the yard, there came a faint, rustling noise like dry leaves skittering across the pavement. I spun around to look back toward the street, and that's when I saw them. Figures, several of them, emerging from the shadows between the other silent, dark houses. They were coming from all directions, gliding toward me without a word. My heart leapt into my throat. In the dim yellow glow of the lone street light at the end of the cul-de-sac, I could just make them out as they drew nearer. The first one stepped into the hazy light, and I saw it was a person, but their face was completely hidden behind a blank white mask. The mask had no features at all, just smooth, pale porcelain, giving the eerie impression of a mannequin or a faceless doll. The others stepped into view, one by one, each wearing the exact same featureless white mask. In an instant, I was surrounded. They closed in on the front porch, encircling me so quietly I could barely hear their footsteps. Their presence pressed in from all sides. I took a step back and felt the porch railing against my back. I had nowhere left to go. My mouth went dry and my hands began to shake, still clutching the bag of food. My breath came in quick, shallow gasps as my mind raced, grasping for any possible escape. One of the masked figures, the one directly in front of me, reached out with a pale hand. It flinched violently and stumbled, the delivery bag tumbling from my grasp and hitting the wooden porch floor with a dull thud. Before I could even speak or move, cold fingers wrapped around my wrist. Their hands were like ice. In a heartbeat, more hands grabbed me by the arms, the shoulders, strong, unyielding grips. I yelped in panic and tried to pull free, but it was no use. There was too many of them. They yanked me forward, propelling me through the open front door of the house. Within seconds, I was dragged into the gaping darkness beyond the threshold. The door slammed shut behind us with a heavy final bang, plunging the foyer into complete darkness. I was blind. It was so dark I couldn't see even the shapes of my attackers, though I could feel them, cold hands gripping my arms, my jacket, and the back of my neck. I was disoriented and terrified. My own ragged breath and pounding heartbeat were loud in my ears. They didn't speak a single word. In complete silence, they began to go through my pockets. I felt the tugs as though they pulled out my wallet, then my phone, and then even my car keys. I knew I should scream or fight, do something, but sheer terror had stolen my voice. When I opened my mouth, nothing came out. It was as if the darkness itself smothered my scream in my throat. Within moments, they let me go. I hadn't even realized they'd finished robbing me until it happened. I was so scared, it was like my mind just shut down. My knees buckled and I collapsed onto the dusty floorboards. I heard the scuffling of their footsteps moving away from me. Then the creak of the door opening again, and a silver of pale streetlight pierced the darkness. Just as quickly, it disappeared as the door slammed shut once more. They were gone. I sat there on the floor, shaking uncontrollably, in the pitch black. I don't know how long I stayed curled on that dusty floor, too paralyzed to move. It could have been minutes or hours. Time felt distorted. My mind kept replaying the moments those figures emerged from the shadows, the feel of those icy hands on my skin, the sight of those blank white masks encircling me. I remember hugging my knees and trying not to sob or scream, afraid that if I made a sound, they'd come back and finish whatever this was. At some point, I realized the house around me was silent and empty. They truly had left. Gathering every ounce of courage I had left, I forced myself to stand. My legs were weak and shaky, that I immediately had to lean against the wall to steady myself. In the darkness, I fumbled around until I found the doorknob. I half expected one of those masks to appear inches from my face, but there was nothing. I opened the door and almost fell out onto the porch. The night air hit my face. The quiet street was exactly as it had been, empty, still, and silent. There was no sign of the masked figures anywhere. The only evidence anything had happened was the pizza bag lying where it fell on the porch and the wild hammering of my heart. My car sat where I had left it, looking completely untouched and incongruous in my dead-end street. I realized I was shaking, not just my hands, but my whole body. They hadn't just robbed me of my phone, wallet, and keys. They had taken something far more personal, my sense of safety, my trust in the world. I stumbled to my car, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to see those faceless shapes emerging again. I practically dove into the driver's seat and slammed and locked down. With trembling hands, I fumbled for the ignition before remembering my keys were gone. A hysterical little laugh bubbled up. Of course, they had my keys. They planned this trap too well. I managed to steady myself just enough to yank the spare keys I kept hidden in my car. The engine roared to life and I sped off, not caring any more about the twists and turns. I drove as fast as I dared through the maze of the neighborhood, the narrow rows and the identical corners weaving around me. I felt like the streets themselves were trying to keep me trapped, looping me in circles as I frantically tried to navigate out. At last, after making one random turn after another, I saw the welcome sight of a wider road, a main road that led back to civilization. I didn't look back. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away from that place. Only when I reached a stretch of highway I recognized did I finally pull over onto the shoulder because I realized I was hyperventilating. I broke down, shaking and crying behind the wheel, the full weight of what happened crashing in on me. I ended up explaining everything to a police officer later, of course, how a delivery led me into a nightmare, but it was too late. Those people, whoever they were, had vanished. They were never caught. Even now, no matter how far I go or how much time passes, I know I'll never truly escape what happened. That night changed something in me. I always look over my shoulder, always tense when I'm alone in the dark. The fear is with me all the time, lurking just out of sight, waiting to drag me back to that twisting, endless nightmare. I don't know, man. I think you should just get over it.
Yeah, it's definitely being a little dramatic. I mean, so they took your keys. Like, get over it.
Yeah. They just, they touched the back of his neck, his pockets, and his no-no zone.
Oh. Did he bring his whistle with him? All right. Next one is called Alone with the Dead. Oh. The hospital was quiet at night. Almost too quiet. I work as an orderly, and my overnight shifts always seem to drag on forever. The endless white walls, the soft hum of fluorescent lights, and the distant beeping of monitors make the place feel eerie once the sun goes down. The only real escape during these hours is the small basement office where we orderlies hang out when things are slow. Unfortunately, that office is right next to the morgue, a fact I try not to think about too much while I'm sitting there. You know, just party with a couple dead people, not a big deal.
Yeah.
Just bring the Ouija board, it'll be a fun time. It was around midnight, maybe a little later. I was in the basement office with another orderly, my coworker for the night. We weren't doing much, just making small talk to stay awake, occasionally glancing at the clock and counting down the minutes until our shift would end. The air was heavy with the scent of disinfectant, the kind that seeps into your clothes and lungs, and the only sounds were the electrical buzz of the lights and the low rumble of the building's ancient HVAC system. In short, it was a typical slow night. Suddenly, I heard footsteps echoing down the empty hallway. They were slow and deliberate, not the brisk, purposeful steps of a doctor or nurse on duty. My coworker and I immediately fell silent and turned our attention to the open doorway, waiting to see who it was. A man was walking down the corridor, and as he passed our door, He briefly glanced in at us. Something about him made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. His gait was odd, too calm, almost prowling. He had a pale, sickly complexion and eyes that looked wide and unsettled, like he hadn't slept in days. His clothes were neat but a bit outdated, like fashions from a couple of decades ago. He certainly didn't look like he belonged in a modern hospital at midnight. He didn't say a word to us. He just kept walking, disappearing beyond our doorway. I realized that I had been holding my breath, and as soon as he was out of sight, I exhaled and exchanged a confused look with the other orderly. We both kind of shrugged. Maybe he was family of a patient or someone from administration. It was unusual to see a visitor on this floor and at this hour, but we tried not to jump to any weird conclusions. A few moments later, those same soft footsteps came again. I felt a prickle of tension as the man reappeared, backtracking, and this time he stopped right in our open doorway. He stood there, half in shadow, looking at us. I could see him more clearly now. His eyes were unnaturally bright and wide, and up close I noticed something off about his expression. It was like a mix of nervousness and intensity, hard to describe, but definitely unsettling.
"Do you have access to the morgue?"
he asked quietly. His voice was low and raspy, each word spoken slowly. I was taken aback by the question. We do occasionally get undertakers or funeral home employees coming by after hours for pickups, but they usually announce themselves at security or have a proper ID. And they definitely don't skulk around basement hallways asking random staff for access. The other orderly and I shared another quick glance. Still, I answered him cautiously. "Yes, I do. Can I help you with something?" The man didn't immediately reply. He stepped just a little closer, enough that the light from our office fell on top of him. He looked even more out of place under the fluorescent glow, like a ghost from another time. There was a strange glint in his eye that put me on edge. I thought he might explain who he was or why he needed the morgue, but instead he just stared at me and my coworker, as if deciding something. Finally, in that same soft, raspy voice, he said, "I'll pay you to let me in. Just for an hour. I need to be alone with the bodies." Oh, shit.
What does he want to do?
I don't know, Cleet. Let's find out. For a second, I didn't understand. The words were so wrong that my brain almost refused to process them. When it clicked, my heart lurched. The other orderly and I looked at each other to confirm we'd both heard what we thought we heard. Alone with the bodies? Did he really just say that? The room suddenly felt a lot colder. I stood up a bit straighter, trying to mask how uneasy I felt. The man continued to stare at us, and there was a desperate eagerness in his eyes now. It made my skin crawl. "I'm sorry," I managed to say, "but we can't do that. It's against hospital policy." I tried to sound firm, but my voice wavered more than I liked. My colleague nodded beside me, backing me up. The man's face changed. His expression hardened in an instant. What little color there was in his cheeks seemed to drain away, and his eyes narrowed. For a heartbeat, I was afraid he might lunge at us or something. But he didn't. Instead, his jaw clenched and a muscle in his temple twitched. He looked at each of us in turn, and the intensity in his gaze was frightening. It was the look of someone barely holding something back. Anger, sadness, I couldn't tell. Seconds ticked by in tense silence. I realized I was gripping the edge of my desk so hard that my knuckles were white. I cleared my throat. "Sir," I began carefully, "you need to leave. I can't let you in there." He said nothing. He just kept staring with that almost predatory stillness. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and walked out, his footsteps echoing away down the corridor. My coworker and I remained frozen for a moment. We listened until we couldn't hear his steps anymore. Then we each let out a breath we'd been holding. "What the hell was that about?" the other orderly whispered, his eyes wide. "I have no idea," I replied, my heart still hammering. We peered into the hallway. It was empty now, looking as innocuous as ever. You'd never guess some strange man had just stood here asking for something so unspeakable. "We need to tell security," I added after a moment. My colleague nodded emphatically. Still shaken, we hurriedly left the office and made our way upstairs to the security station. Every shadow in those empty halls felt menacing now, Every flicker of fluorescent light in my peripheral vision made me jumpy. When we reached the security office, the guard on duty could tell immediately from our faces that something was wrong. He recounted the whole encounter, the man wandering around, his odd questions, and especially what he'd said about being alone with the bodies in the morgue. The guard's reaction surprised me. He didn't look as shocked as I would expect. In fact, he swore under his breath and leaned forward, a look of recognition and anger passing over his face. "Did he offer you money to get into that morgue?" he asked, voice tight. It's like, he's just a regular. He just likes to pay for dead bodies.
That's Timothy. He comes in every week. He tries to, at least.
Some people let him in, some people don't.
Oh, don't say that.
"Yes," I replied, heart still pounding. He said he'd pay us to let him in for an hour. The guard exchanged a look with one of his partners. "It's him again," he muttered. Again? Jesus Christ. Apparently, this wasn't the first time. The guard quickly explained that for the past couple of months there had been a handful of incidents involving a man of that description trying to gain access to the morgue at odd hours. Security would get a report or catch a glimpse of him on cameras, but every time they responded, the man was gone. They suspected he'd been slipping in through a fire exit or tailing staff with badges before we locked down for the night. My stomach turned. The idea that this same person had been lurking around for months, trying to bribe or trick his way into the morgue, was deeply disturbing. And no one knew why. What could he possibly want with the bodies? Oh, come on. A flood of disturbing possibilities rushed through my mind.
Yeah.
None of them good. Now he's trying to start a ping pong club. That's all it is.
What do you want to do? Drink tea with them or something?
I like to dress him up for a tea party. We'd all heard stories of people trying to do sick things, whether due to mental illness or other darker motivations. Now, I didn't want to speculate, but the guard's grave expression told me he had the same unpleasant theories about this man's intentions. The guard thanked us for reporting the encounter and assured us that they would be doing a thorough search of the hospital and reviewing camera footage to try and catch him. He also mentioned they'd increase patrols around the morgue and the lower floors for the next few nights. Still, as my coworker and I made our way back to the basement, I felt no relief. If anything, I was more on edge than I was before. The rest of that shift, the hospital didn't feel like the safe, if creepy place it usually was at night. Instead, it felt like every shadow concealed a secret, and every distant sound might be that man returning for another attempt. I couldn't concentrate on anything except replaying the encounter over and over in my mind. His pale face, the way his eyes had lit up with that unsettling eagerness when he made his proposal, and the menace that lurked behind his expression when we refused. By the time my shift ended at dawn, I was exhausted, but not from work, from stress. I clocked out and stepped into the early morning light, half expecting to see that man's face in the parking lot or watching from some corner. Of course, I didn't. I never saw him again after that night. Security never caught him, though there were rumors among the staff for a few more sightings in the following weeks. Eventually, the whispers about the morgue prowler died down, and people moved to the next hospital drama. But not me. I still think about that man from time to time, especially when I find myself down near the morgue on a quiet night. I'll be walking those empty halls on some routine errand, and suddenly I'll remember his low, rasping voice.
"I need to be alone with those bodies."
I'll feel a chill run through me, and I'll quicken my pace until I'm back in a brightly lit, populated area of the hospital. We were lucky that night. I don't know exactly what we prevented by saying no, but I have a feeling it was something truly awful. In my nightmares, I sometimes see a version of events where we said yes, where we let him in, and what I imagine happening in those scenarios makes me break out in a cold sweat. Oh, Jesus. Makes me break out in a cold sweat. Oh, even now, whenever I pass by the doors to the morgue, I feel that same shiver I felt when I realized what that man was asking for. I don't think that will ever go away. We came so close to opening the door to something monstrous, and it's a brush with darkness I won't soon forget. I know, man, some fucking people are creepy.
This one is called The Beast of the Pine Barrens. In 2019, when I was 13 years old, my dad took me on a hunting trip deep in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. We'd been in those woods before on day trips, but this time my dad wanted to try an overnight hunt. From the moment we arrived, something about the forest felt different. The trees seemed thicker and closer together, almost as if they were silently watching us. The sun was setting as we parked the truck at the edge of the woods. The air was heavy with the smell of damp leaves and pine needles, and an unnatural hush had fallen over the forest, so quiet that even the usual chirp of crickets or sigh of the wind was absent. My dad has always said that the best time to hunt is at night, when the animals are more active. I wasn't scared. I had been hunting with him since I was old enough to handle a small rifle. I trusted him completely, but as the last light of dusk faded and the darkness swallowed the pine barrens, I found myself growing uneasy. The long shadows of twilight stretched into a solid black all around us, and the familiar forest now felt like a maze of unknown shapes. We trekked quietly into the woods, our boots crunching softly on that layer of dried leaves carpeting the ground. I carried a small rifle that Dad had given me for my birthday, holding it tight against me. The metal felt cool on my palm. Dad had a bigger hunting rifle and a flashlight. Before long, the trees grew so thick they blotted out the moonlight entirely. We switched on our flashlights, the beams cutting narrow tunnels of visibility in the dark. Every so often, Dad would pause, tilt his head and listen, and maybe crouch down to examine a track of a broken twig. He was an experienced hunter and usually could read the forest like a book. But that night, the forest was unnaturally still. We didn't hear the rustle of a single animal, no deer peeking through the thickets, not even a distant hoot of an owl. It was as if every creature had decided this part of the barrens was off limits. The only sounds were from our own careful footsteps and an occasional drip of condensation falling from the pine needles above. After about an hour of trudging through the eerie silence, my legs began to ache. I finally whispered to my dad that I needed a break. He nodded, and we found a small clearing where an old, fallen log lay on the ground. We sat down, and I realized how fast my heart had been beating. I could actually hear it in my ears once we stopped moving. The darkness encircled us, our flashlights now off to conserve battery. Only the vague outlines of trees were visible against the starless sky. Dad whispered something about waiting for the right moment, or maybe finding tracks at dawn, but I barely heard him. I was focused on the darkness around us, straining my ears for a sound that might hint at an animal nearby. That's when I heard it, the low growl. At first, I thought I might have imagined it. It was so subtle, I wasn't sure it was real. But then it came again, a deep, guttural rumble that felt in my chest more than my head and ears. My heart jumped. This was no deer, and definitely not any small game like a raccoon or fox. It sounded big. I glanced at my dad. He was already alert, head turned sharply toward the line of trees where the darkness was thickest. I could see the faint outline of his face. He looked tense, eyes wide, as he scanned the tree line. Slowly, he reached down and picked up his rifle from where it leaned against the log. Without a word, he motioned for me to do the same. My hands trembled a little as I lifted my smaller rifle and clicked the safety off. The growl came a third time, and now I could tell it was closer than before. The sound seemed to warp around us, reverberating through the still night air. It was the most unnerving sound I'd heard. Feral, angry, and unlike any animal noise I knew. The back of my neck prickled with fear. We both stood up as quietly as we could. My dad took cautious steps forward, sweeping his flashlight in the direction of the sound. The beam danced across the tree trunks and undergrowth but revealed nothing. We couldn't pinpoint where it was or what it was. And that's when I saw something move between the trees. A shifting shadow, there one moment and gone the next. "Over there," I whispered, barely audibly. We both stared hard into the darkness. A shape stepped out from behind the large pine, about 30 feet away. In the faint glow of our flashlight, a figure emerged from the shadows. My mind struggled to make sense of it. It was tall, much taller than any deer or bear we'd ever seen, maybe 7 or 8 feet if it stood fully upright. Its form was hunched and vaguely canine. I could make out what looked like a snout and pointed ears. like a wolf's, but much larger. Tufts of matted fur were visible in patches, and its eyes, they had a faint yellow glow, catching the reflection of our flashlight. My dad sucked in his breath. He raised his rifle, aiming it at the creature, but he didn't fire. I understood why. I was frozen in place, but even I knew that we were looking at something not entirely of this world. Shooting it might just make it angry. The creature bared its teeth, and in the glow of the flashlight, I caught a glint of long, sharp fangs. A deep, rumbling snarl rolled out from it, louder than before. The sound vibrated in the air, so powerful, I felt it deep in my chest. Cold night air billowed in puffs from its muzzle. It was so close we could see its breath.
"Stay still,"
Dad whispered so quietly I could barely make out the words. I was already rooted to the spot, my legs unwilling to move. For a tense moment, none of us moved. The creature, my father, or me. We were at a standoff in the middle of the silent pine forest. Then the creature began to circle, slowly, disappearing from our flashlight's beam. We could hear it moving through twigs, snapping softly, brush rustling. We spun in place, trying to follow the sound. Every time I caught a glimpse of those eyes in the shadows, they seemed to be in a different spot, as if it was circling us in the darkness just beyond our vision. I could hardly breathe. I've never been so scared. My entire body was trembling, and I could hear my own pulse pounding. Dad kept his rifle raised, turning steadily, trying to track it. Still, he didn't shoot. It was like we both somehow knew that a gun might not do anything to stop this thing. Suddenly, the creature let out an ear-splitting howl, and it was a sound straight from a nightmare. Loud, penetrating, and filled with a primeval rage. The trees around us seemed to shudder with the force of it. In that split second, something in my dad snapped. He lunged backward and grabbed my arm. "Run," he said. I never heard such terror in my father's voice before. It jolted me into action. We took off in the woods, sprinting blindly into the darkness, no longer caring about flashlights or staying quiet. I clutched my rifle tightly as I ran, branches whipping at my arms and face. Behind us, the undergrowth exploded with noise, heavy footfalls and a crash of something charging through the brush. The creature was chasing us. My lungs burned as we tore through the forest. I was fast for my age, but my dad was faster, practically dragging me along by the arm for the first few steps until my legs caught up. The trees flew by in a blur of black silhouettes. I stumbled over unseen roots and rocks, scratching my legs, but I didn't dare slow down. The growls and howls behind us were all the motivation I needed. The pine barrens are vast and can be disorienting, especially at night. In our blind panic, we dashed off the narrow game trail we had been on and plunged into a dense woods. Every direction looked the same, just endless trunks of tangled brush. I had no idea how long we ran. Adrenaline made time ambiguous. It could have been minutes or an hour. Eventually, when my legs felt like they might give out and my breaths were coming in ragged gasps, my dad pulled me behind a large tree trunk. We both stood there panting, trying to listen. The forest had gone quiet again, except for the distant whisper of the wind through the pines. My whole body trembled, and I realized tears were mixing with my sweat on my cheeks. Dad leaned against the tree, his face ashen and a faint moonlight that managed to pierce the canopy. I could see his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. We didn't hear the creature anymore. No footsteps, no growls, just an oppressive silence. I opened my mouth to speak, but Dad held a finger to my lips, eyes still scanning our surroundings. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, huddled together and straining our senses for any sign of that thing. The silence was almost worse than the noise. At least when it was growling, we knew where it was. Now we had no idea if it had given up or if it was stalking us quietly, waiting for a chance to pounce. After a few minutes, Dad leaned close to my ear and whispered, "We need to keep moving. We're lost, but we have to find the truck." I nodded, afraid that even the sound of my voice might draw it back to us. My legs were jelly, but I knew we could stop. We began walking, quickly, but as quietly as possible, through the darkness. Dad had lost his flashlight in the chaos. I still had mine dangling from my wrist by its lanyard. I risked turning it on again, keeping the beam pointed low to the ground just so he wouldn't trip. The light was weak. Our frantic flight had drained a lot of its battery, but it was better than nothing. Every so often we would hear a crack in the darkness or see a shadow shift unnaturally, and our hearts would leap into our throats. But it was always just the forest playing tricks. The creak of the branch, the flutter of a distant bird taking a wing. Whatever the creature was, we didn't encounter it again in those moments. After what might have been an hour, time moves strangely when you're terrified, we stumbled out onto a narrow dirt path. In the weak glow of my fading flashlight, I recognized the path's curve and an old weather-beaten trail marker post. A surge of hope rushed through me. I knew this path. We'd passed this way earlier when we'd ventured in. "This way," I whispered, tugged at Dad's sleeve and pointing down the path. He nodded, eyes lighting up with relief. We followed the overgrown trail, moving as fast as our exhausted bodies would allow. And then through the thinning trees, I saw the flash of metal reflecting the moonlight. The truck. We both practically burst out of the woods into the small clearing where the pickup was parked. We were scraped up, sweat-soaked, and gasping, but we were alive and we had made it back. I clambered into the passenger seat while Dad fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking. The engine roared to life and he floored the accelerator, not even bothering to turn the headlights until we were already tearing down the dirt access road away from the cursed forest. Only once we hit the main road did either of us speak. We drove in silence, both of us staring straight ahead until the lights of distant small-town civilization began reappearing through the trees. Finally, in a shaking voice, Dad asked, "You okay, buddy?" I noted, though, I wasn't okay. I wouldn't be okay for a long time. I didn't sleep at all that night, and for many nights afterwards. Whenever I closed my eyes, I saw that hulking shadow and heard the echo of that hellish howl. Dad and I never really discussed what we saw in detail. I think it scared him as much as it had scared me, and he wasn't eager to relive it. We both knew there was something in those woods, and we could not explain. Something beyond ordinary. The Pine Barrens have always had legends, from the Jersey Devil on down, but I never gave them much thought until that night. We made it out unharmed, which is a miracle, and something I thank God for, because I'm not entirely sure how we did. But one thing I know for certain, I will never go hunting in the Pine Barrens again. Whatever's out there, it can keep those woods. I have no desire ever to encounter it again.
Jesus Christ.
Jersey Devil.
I realize it. All right, folks. Well, that is going to wrap us up for the evening. Thank you again, as always, for joining us for some spooky tales. We want to give a huge shout out to our paid supporters of the show: Soylent, Cleat Feet, Lara, Mothman, Conklin Family, and Lou. If you want to join these amazing people for a paid support, there's a link below and several tiers to choose from, as well as a link that will take you to a page for a one-time beer donation to the show.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe, as it really helps us get us out there. And as always, thank you for entering the abyss.
Until next time.